Welcome to A1R Psychic Radio here on Moonstruck TV with Amanda Hall Psychic all the way from the Gold Coast. I hope wherever you are on this amazing planet of ours, you're having an absolutely sensational week. It's been a very, very interesting week, and we'll get on to that a little bit more later on in the show when we talk about the new moon in Pisces. But first of all, let's kick the show off with the Secrets of Tarot card of the week, which is the Magician. Now, it always never ceases to amaze me that how I draw a card before the show for the week ahead and how it tends to tie in with what I'm going to be talking about. Now, it's not sheer luck and it's not coincidental. I don't believe in coincidences, but it just shows me that everything ties together, as I've always believed, whether you're looking at astrology, numerology, palmistry, psychic ability, just listening to your hunches, that there is no coincidences. Everything is linked. And so is energy. And energy is something that we all have surrounding us each and every day. So the card this week is the Magician. Now, the Magician card is what it says. It's a magician. He has all his tools of trade in front of him. And it's the card of the element of surprise. Now, the word surprise can be an unusual sort of word, because some people tend to think of surprises and they think you beauty presents and it's all good and everything's wonderful and everything's happy. And other people think of the word surprise and think, uh-oh, what have I got to look out for? Something bad is on its way, or something that I need to deal with. It's a challenge. It's something that I need to be focusing on. So I suppose the message here with the Magician is that it can be either. It can be either good or bad, but whatever it is going to catch you a little bit off guard. And it's telling you to have all your tools in front of you to be able to maneuver your way through whatever the surprise is, that you're well prepared. And that's the way I like to look at the Magician. I look at that and I think, okay, get all my tools ready to be prepared for whatever life is going to dish out to me. Now, this week we're in the middle of the new moon in Pisces. Now, the reasons I'm going to rush through this fairly quickly, because I want to get on and talk about astrologically the coronavirus, because I've had a number of people ask me about that, and particularly when I was talking with a friend yesterday, Margaret in Adelaide, and good morning, Margaret, if you're watching. And she said to me, are you going to talk about the coronavirus? And I said, oh, no, I'm going to talk about the new moon this week on the show. So I'm going to talk about both. The new moon is so very important because it's the last new moon in the astrological calendar for this year. Being the final sign of the zodiac, it's the final new moon before we move into next month, the beginning of the astrology or the zodiac year. So the new moon in Pisces is very, very important. It's our final opportunity to release things that no longer suit us. It's also the opportunity to set our intentions for one final time in this astrological year, where we can finally sort of wrap up the year with the things that we were trying to bring into our life that are new, that are important, that are fresh, that are opportunities to be able to sort of release old habit patterns and old grievances and whatever and start afresh. Now, that can be with people, it can be with situations. And I know a lot of people have been messaging me that I can't sleep and why am I so titchy and why am I so nervous, Amanda, and I can't focus on anything. Well, that sometimes is what the new moon in Pisces can do, because it's water. It brings up all the emotions, all the things that were buried deep down in our subconscious and unconscious part of the mind, and brings them to the surface. So very, very quickly, we'd be burning a new moon candle. 2 days on the approach. 2 days on the approach, 3 days of the actual full moon, the new moon cycle, which is the 24th through to the 27th of March, depending where you are in the northern or the southern hemisphere. Here in the southern hemisphere, we're sort of on the tail end of the new moon. And then 2 days on the descending part after the new moon. That's really important. I like to do everything in a 7-day cycle. And because it's in Pisces, we're going to be focusing on the water sign candle as well. So it's really important to burn both candles if you have them in your kit, because you're bringing in the energy of the water sign, of the Pisces energy as well, and helping to release, but also reinvigorate your life and bring towards you things that are sort of new. And it's really interesting because yesterday, even though I was busy working, I had a number of phone calls with some very close friends yesterday, and everybody was telling me how that this new moon was affecting them in different sort of ways, and how a lot of stuff was being resurfaced from the past, things that they thought that they dealt with and were now releasing or letting go of. So if you haven't got a big area, you can always make up a gift box set of smaller candles. And this week I've made the new moon, the water sign candle, and I've also put the healing candle in there because I think it's important that we heal ourselves along the way as well. You know, it's all well and fine to release everything, but we have to do the healing as well. And sometimes healing is not the easiest thing for all of us to do. We tend to sort of think of healing means going to a medical practitioner, but quite often it's healing our emotions and letting go of things. So now I want to focus on a very serious subject around the world at the moment, and that's the coronavirus. I want to be very clear, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm looking at this purely from an astrology point of view as a qualified astrologer. And when I started to look at this morning before the show, I think I was a little bit surprised at how intense the planetary configurations are at the moment when you start focusing on something like this, like on a virus that's worldwide. There's a lot of stuff in the media this morning talking about it being potentially a pandemic around the world and how different countries, different nations are gearing up ready for it, having hospitals dedicated ready for what they believe is going to happen over the next couple of weeks. And I sort of started to think, oh, are they sort of imagining this a bit? Are they sort of blowing it out of all proportion? Because as we spoke about last week on the show, Mercury, the planet of communication, is retrograde at the moment. And sometimes that can tend to make people exaggerate things a little bit on a communication level, or we don't have our listening ears on and only half listen to a story and then make up the rest of the version of the story ourselves. And sometimes we as individuals, as human beings, can blow it out of all proportion. But when I started to look at the chart that's known as the transit chart or the here and now chart for now on a global situation, not looking at it from any one particular country, the first thing that jumped out at me was the South Node. Now, the South Node is one of the moon's nodes. Now, this is where we look to take the easy way out with something, and it was holding hands with the planet Mars. And I thought how very, very interesting. Here we are looking at, or maybe governments and medical practitioners around the world have tried to find the easy way out of dealing with this virus, and in as such, not necessarily ignored our health, but what they've done is they've tried to pad this down, to sort of not create mass hysteria around the world saying, oh, well, it's not that bad and we don't need to quarantine people and we don't need to do this and we don't need to do that. Where behind the scenes, they were looking at this in a very different sort of way, saying, how in the hell are we going to cope with this? How are we going to release this to the media without creating mass hysteria? And I think it was a very orchestrated sort of plan in as much, but at the same time, I think they were literally caught with their pants down a little bit too, because I think they all believed that this was something just like an influenza, that we can sort of just write it off as that. And, you know, a few people will get sick and unfortunately a few people will pass away, but it won't be a worldwide global catastrophe sort of thing that we can sort of get around this. We don't necessarily need to alarm the rest of the world. And it was only as people started to become sick in other nations that had visited China that all of a sudden the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, and we have to start looking at this. So it's been one of those very uncomfortable sort of situations because we still have so many planets sitting in Capricorn. And I've spoken about this many times, where Capricorn represents big business, it represents governments, it represents everything official in our lives, including doctors, dentists, hospitals, anything that you look at as being a medical facility. So when you look at, we've got the South Node, or taking the easy way out, holding hands with Mars, the planet of action, the planet that takes us to war or gives us the energy to sort of combat something. Now, it's actually making a pleasant aspect, but also an aspect of unusual and things coming at us suddenly out of nowhere to Uranus in Taurus. So it's, in a sense, took them a little bit by surprise that how quickly this started to take off and how all of a sudden, oh my goodness, we better start telling the world about this. We can no longer contain it. But also just moving a little bit away from that, still staying in the same sign of Capricorn, we have Jupiter, the planet of luck and expansion, but this also encompasses the whole globe, holding hands with Pluto, the planet of transformation, holding hands with Saturn, the planet of discipline and structure and regime and everything in our lives, again, all still sitting in Capricorn. So here we have Jupiter sort of saying, like, you know, this is the whole globe. We're all holding hands. We've all got to transform. We've all got to find some solutions. We've all got to tackle this in a very logical, practical, disciplined sort of way, and we haven't got any time to waste. So it's very, very interesting that I think while the powers that be have tried to protect us or shelter us from this and play down the effects of this and saying, oh, well, let's keep our focus on other world events like bushfires or floods or who's in politics and who's, fighting with who over something silly or something trivial, we'll take, the heat off this potential pandemic around the world. So it's very, very interesting the way that governments and official places around the world, and particularly medical people, have tried to play this down, not to create pandemonium and not to create panic around the world. But I think now it's not necessarily the time we hit the panic button, but I do think it's the time that we all start to collectively try and look at, okay, how can I minimise my risk, me as an individual, of contracting this virus or spreading the virus. So if you don't have to travel, then don't travel. Try and limit the things that you do. And I think just be more aware of your own hygiene. Wash your hands. Make sure that you don't touch your face after you've been in a supermarket or a public place. Keep washing your hands. Take some hand sanitizer with you. And I'm also going to say we've also got, we've got the sun in Pisces, which is conjunct Mercury retrograde at the moment. It's a very wide sort of holding hands situation with Neptune, but they are still conjunct. So on that level, we've got things coming from our heart. We've got communication and information that's coming through that may not necessarily be clear, or we're not fully understanding it. And with the wide conjunction or the wide holding hands situation to Neptune, where Neptune is the planet of illusion and delusion, we have to make sure that everything that we're hearing from the media is actual fact, not just somebody sensationalising something because they want to get the ratings or they want to be the first one to break the news on a story. So I suppose my message here is be vigilant, look out for your own personal hygiene. Don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary, but at the same time, make sure that you're listening very carefully to what's being said and cut the spin or the BS out of it and look at it in, if it doesn't feel right to you, or if you feel that that's a bit of a dodgy brother's story, then maybe do a bit more research and form your own conclusions. I don't know that we've necessarily got to panic as a globe, but I do think that we all need to take some responsibility for this and start to look after our own environment as much as we can and look after our own health as much as possible. And maybe, again, it's one of those things that I keep talking about. Pluto is trying to transform the world. We've all taken too many liberties. We haven't looked at global warming. We haven't looked at things. And maybe, just maybe, we haven't looked at the way that other countries might gather their food sources and how they harvest them, and do they have the proper hygiene standards that we might have in the Western world. All these things are Pluto slowly trying to transform the planet to make it a better place for us. So I haven't scared anybody. That wasn't my intentions. I just wanted to bring it to you from my point of view as an astrologer. What are the planets saying to us and how can we learn from that? So we're going to go to our first caller, which is Annette in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. Are you there, Annette?
Hi. Nice to talk to you.
You have a question for me, sweetie?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any people coming through for me.
Okay, Ned, as I say weekly on this show, it's not something that we can guarantee. And I want to be very clear on this. It's probably the number one question at the moment. People ring up or get a reading and they say, is there a message coming through from the other side? What people fail to realise, no medium, no clairvoyant, no astrologer, no tarot reader, no whatever, has a direct dial telephone number that they can dial through to the other side and say, okay, I want to contact my dad or my mum or Auntie Mary or whatever. When they go through to the other side, Annette, they don't necessarily want to be in our face all the time. They're there, yes, they're watching over us, they see everything that we're doing, but they have things that they want to do. They might want to have a bit of a rest. So unless it's something that they see that they really need to weigh in on, they don't necessarily come through with a message. So in all my years of being in this sort of work, what I say to people is, give me a question. And if they want to weigh in, they will. I'll give you what they're giving me. But 9 times out of 10, what we're looking for is to just know that they're okay. I can guarantee that. I haven't had anybody come through on the other side in over 40 years telling me that they're having a rotten time over there. Everybody that comes through always tells me to reassure their family, their loved ones, that they're okay, that they love them, they see what's going on in there, and that they're happy. And, you know, that they're no longer in pain or no longer suffering an illness or whatever it was that they had here. And quite often, Annette, they come through at not necessarily the age they were when they passed, but a time in their life where they felt their most powerful. And for some people, it's, you know, in their 20s or 30s when they were young and attractive and full of energy and, you know, vitality, and they felt at their strongest. And for other people, it may be much later in their life when they felt their greatest accomplishment work-wise was a certain thing, or family-wise. So there's no hard and fast rules. What I am picking up is there is a male energy around you very strongly, and all as he's showing me is he's got a smile on his face, and Eddie hasn't sort of given me a message in any way.
Oh.
So all as I can take from that is whatever that you've just started to bring into your life, or the things that you're working on, keep going, because you've got their seal of approval, that they feel you're on the right path. So does that make sense to you?
Yes, that sounds very positive. I love that.
Yeah, and that's sort of, you know, like, it's more for our passed over relatives to come to us as individuals, because we know their habits. Do you know what I mean? If you had a dad that was a practical joker and loved moving mum's photo frames on the mantelpiece because it drove her nuts as a loving gesture, that's the sort of thing that they're going to do to get your attention, because you know for a categorical fact that was dad. That's what dad loved to do. You know, or if somebody liked to talk through mum's favourite soap opera, and, you know, you're watching telly and all of a sudden, you know, the TV goes off again, you know, it's that person. So look for signs that mean something to you, that you can relate it back to the person. So I just know that you've got a big year ahead of you, Annette, and that male energy that was coming through, which was older than you, is just, he's got the most beautiful big smile on his face. It's sort of like an exaggerated smile. So I'd say keep going, sweetheart. Everything's right on cue. So that's where we're going to leave Annette in British Columbia. We're going to now talk with Brooke in Masterton in New Zealand. Are you there, Brooke?
Pardon, what was that, sorry?
Do you have a question for me, Brooke?
Yes.
And what's your question,
what do you
sweetheart?
predict for my future?
Okay, that's a really nice question, Brooke, to have somebody ask what do I predict for their future. The first thing that I'm getting is a very itchy left eye. So I don't know whether you've been having trouble with your eye at the moment, or it's just indicating to me that you need to be aware of the fact that there's a potentially an allergy or something with your eye. Do you often get affected by allergies, Brooke?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, that was the first thing that was coming through to me, was this itchy left eye. So even though I'm not a doctor and I'm not supposed to talk about medical things, I can't not share something like that with me when Spirit's trying to get my attention in that way, that you've got to be aware of that. Like, they were making a big deal out of that. Like, don't ignore it. Don't just sort of say, oh, well, it's because the wind changed and, you know, the pollen's got in my eye. This is something a little bit more serious than that they want you to sort of give attention to. The other thing that they're showing with me very strongly here, Brooke, is the fact that have you been working a lot on yourself in this last 6 to 12 months? Because they're showing me a lot of things that have come to an end, or things that you've sorted out, resolved, and sort of said, right, well, I've completed that, or I'm no longer going to be that sort of person. I'm now starting to put myself first. I'm not going to be everything to everyone else. It's my turn now. Is that where you're heading?
Yes, that's correct.
Good. Well, they want you to continue more and more and more of that, because by doing that, then there will be more messages or more symbols or signs that will come to you from your passed over loved ones. It's interesting because I've got a very strong, forceful older woman, and I'm assuming she was your grandmother or great-grandmother. Was there a grandmother or a great-grandmother that was very forceful, very bossy, and everybody was sort of a little bit, oh, you know, when she spoke, we all jumped to attention? Yeah, well, she's with you very strongly. She's making me laugh because she's saying you're a chip off the old block. So you must be becoming more like her every day, in as much as you're becoming so strong. And she's handing over the crown to you, that, you're going to be the person that everybody's going to fear a little bit or come to you for your wisdom. So that's really special, Brooke. They don't often come through and give a message like that. So I take that as something very, very powerful, and you should feel very honoured that she's handing you the baton. She's also showing me by about June, is there talk of a change of residence or changing something very strongly around the home you're living in?
Yes.
Yeah, she's saying to me that's got to go ahead, like, that you can't back out of it, you can't change your mind on that. That's got to be a definite.
Yeah.
I don't know why she's showing me a lizard. I don't quite understand.
I've had pet lizards.
Okay, well, she's showing me this beautiful lizard, and she was patting
My
it
mum's
like
got
it's a
them.
cat. And it was sort of like, I haven't seen anybody pat a lizard. I've seen, stroke a lizard. I've seen people hold them and talk to them, but she was stroking it like you would a cat. Like you're stroking the cat's head. She's doing that to the lizard. So I'll leave that with you. That was very powerful from her.
I've had a number of lizards who my mum now has, which is her mother.
Right. Okay. She's also showing me you've got to zip your purse shut. Have you been spending too much money?
No.
Well, that's what she's showing me. She showed me a purse and she was zipping it shut.
Okay.
So if you haven't been spending too much money, in your opinion, then she's showing you there's going to be a time where you've got to zip your purse shut, like no more to be given or no more to be spent on something, but you'll know exactly what it is. It's sort of almost like you go to open your purse, even if it mightn't have a zipper on it, and you can't get it open, and that'll be her telling you to zip your purse shut. Oh, she's very bossy.
She is.
But in a loving way. I don't mean that in a negative way. She's very loving. She's very strong.
Yeah.
And she was always very close to you. Right before you were even born, she just knew that there was something special about you, something that was going to be different from the other children that were yet to be born in the family. You were sort of given a crown before you were born, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do you live close to the water?
Yeah, kind
with
of.
mountains in behind, because she's showing me a scene where I'm seeing flat water, but I'm also seeing mountains behind, and I don't know what she was trying to show me about that, whether that's somewhere where you live or where it's somewhere that you're going to get great inspiration, but she just showed me this like a photograph of this place, or whether it was somewhere that was very special to her.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come through with messages that we don't quite understand at the time, and it's only later we have the aha
I understand that one. I understand that one very strongly.
Okay, so whatever that's got to do with, she's saying to me that she's not giving me any more information on that. That's between you and her.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's wonderful, Brooke. I'm glad we've been able to help you. We're coming to the end of the show again. I mean, it seems to go very, very quickly every week. And I hope that, the little bit of astrology that I did with everybody today around the world just helped sort of you understand a little bit more about this coronavirus and how we all need to take some form of responsibility for our own physical health, and, sort of just being a little bit more diligent with our hand washing and making sure we don't put ourselves in situations that we don't need to. I don't think we need to panic and all run around with a face mask on when we go to the grocery store, but I do think that we can all help to minimise the spread of this by just being a little bit more aware. And, sometimes I think we forget that we've got to look out for other people. And, by doing that and being more mindful of things and making sure that we dispose of our rubbish and our trash more thoughtfully and make sure that we prevent the spread of germs if we possibly can, I think is a very, very important thing. And for those of you that watch the show regularly, you'll know my producer and I are having this little joke between each other about David Cassidy songs. Well, this week he brought up, doesn't somebody want to be wanted like me, and he was going to burst into song during the show. And I suggested to him we get Danny Bonaducci, who was part of the Partridge Family, little redheaded Danny, who's now a grown-up, to come on the show and play the bass for us, because he did a segment with David about 40 years after, which was 10 years ago now, where he actually did learn to play the bass. I don't think he's much good at singing, but he did finally learn how to play the Partridge Family hits. And there's some stuff on YouTube about that, which is quite entertaining, where Danny actually comes dressed as one of the Partridge Family people in the red velvet suit with the frilly necktie, and told David that he wasn't actually appropriately dressed for the reunion. So that's just a little bit of trivia for today. So, enjoy the rest of the new moon. Look forward to the astrology changing in the next month as we move into the new astrological year this year, which is very exciting. I know the Chinese New Year has already started and we're in the year of the rat. We don't necessarily have years like that as far as Western astrology is concerned, but each year is very important, very significant, and we all have the opportunity to live our very, very best life if we really listen to our own instincts and our gut feelings and be kind to each other and try and do something nice for our fellow human beings each and every day. Then I believe then we are living our life to the fullest. So until next week, keep a smile on your face, and don't forget, doesn't somebody want to be wanted just like me? Bye for now.